All right, welcome everyone to the live stream today by Force 13 on the current activity in the world right now. We have Hurricane Hector, Tropical Storm Christy, Tropical Storm Yagi, and Invest 96 and 97W in the world right now. We're also joined by our team today on Discord. Why don't you guys say hello? All right, why don't you guys say hello today? We got Hank, David, Marcel, and we have someone else, Moonchild. How you guys doing? Oh, I can't
Good
hear.
to be here.
Yeah, how you doing, David?
Not bad, thank you.
Marcel,
and
how are you
hi to our
doing?
viewers.
Marcel, how are you doing tonight? Marcel doesn't want to speak. Hank, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah, you have Hector up on the satellite right now?
Yes, that is Hector.
Hello.
Hello, Marcel. Thanks for joining us. What have you been looking at with Hector in the past day? I know it kind of surprised us by going back up to Category 4 strength again.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, it wasn't too big of a surprise at my end. I mean, considering that it had a better environment past Hawaii. I mean, yes, it's probably a short-lived thing, because after that you have, well, sheer. So I don't think that this is gonna last particularly long. That's kind of why the CPHP forecast kind of shows it to kind of start degrading over the next couple days into eventually a tropical storm as it crosses the date line, which is somewhere around here. So and then it's gonna gradually turn to the northwest, and then probably recurve, kind of get a better sense, recurve well east of Japan, like out here, and then recurve maybe affect Alaska as a remnant, like ex-tropical cyclone, but we'll see on that.
Yeah, there was it's been a much more distinct change in the models in the past 2 days, saying it'll recurve compared to further out when they were saying it could stick more on a westward track before. So, you know, it's fortunate. It looks like it's just gonna be a fish really for the rest of its lifetime at this point. Let's see, what else do we have? We have Tropical Storm Yagi as well out there in the Western Pacific. We had an update on the channel for it earlier today. It weakened a bit down back to 35 knots again. It's kind of losing a bit of its steam since then, really. I know you have it up there on screen share right now.
Yeah, so this is Yagi right here. Yeah, pretty weak. Not really much to say, though. It did recently just have this nice burst convection over its center. It's going to continue to progress towards the northwest, probably hit Okinawa as a weak tropical storm, and then could end up hitting this same area of China, which has been kind of bombarded with tropical cyclones recently. Nothing particularly strong, but it's had a lot of them. It had Ample, it had Jongdari, it had, I think, another depression. Yeah, 13W. So Yagi is probably going to add to that total. Though, fortunately, none of them have been particularly strong. Maria kind of hit further down over here. So yeah, probably just another weak storm for these guys, as it's going to be steered. Let me just zoom out a little bit. Steered kind of by this front right here, kind of pushing air kind of in this general direction. It's going to kind of generally just move towards the Shanghai area, but not really be too strong.
I'm going to pull up a graphic right now on for the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's track forecast. It's really different from yesterday. Before they were thinking it would make landfall in North Korea, and now they've shifted really towards the Shanghai thing. David, I know you've been looking in the Western Pacific in particular. You've done video updates on Yagi. What have you been looking at with the storm?
The National Weather Service, Graham, just following on to what Hank has said, National Weather Center, I think it's the National Weather Center, they have it 24.6 degrees north, 130.3 degrees east. It's about 200 miles southeast of Okinawa, or 15 miles northwest of Guam. Maximum sustained winds 40 knots, moving northwest. However, there is information in the advisory that it is expected to turn to the west-northwest with a slight decrease in forward speed over the next 24 hours. Tropical storm force winds extend outward from the center up to 115 miles. So that's on Yagi. I haven't had a chance to look at 96W, although the Vietnamese weather offers. There's no change. I think it is tracking slightly to the northwest, and I will get back to you with some additional information.
Yeah, Moonchild, I don't know if you've been looking at the Western Pacific storms, but based off of, a little bit of the stream so far, what have you been looking at today?
Well, here's what I've noticed. And actually, let me get this bigger so that I can see what you guys are looking at. All right, so where's Hector? Hector is over here on the east, right here.
Hector is going to be in the Central Pacific right now. Let me pull that up quickly.
Okay. So what I mean, and this is for Storm Chaser 75 and whomever might be confused. This is my first time on here, so y'all don't know me. I'm just an observer. I enjoy hurricanes. And I currently live in South Florida, so it's kind of important. But anyway, so when it comes to Hector, as it moves across the international date line, it's actually going to be a little bit more north than a lot of these storms start. Am I wrong? If I'm wrong right there, then I'll shut up.
No, it's going to be starting its recurve at that point.
Right. So just like we have those fish storms in the Atlantic over colder waters, I'm going to assume that this is colder water, yes?
Mm-hmm. It's definitely going to be entering colder water at that point.
So then it's going to be carried north. It just makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Models are in pretty tight agreement at that point that the storm will be weakening at that phase.
It's kind of sad. I, in my weirdo way, I really kind of wanted it to, reform and do its thing.
Yeah. Marcel, what are you thinking with these storms right now?
Well, I think simply the storm Hector is going to weaken in the next days as it enters windshield area and cool waters and.
Yeah, and we also have out back in the Eastern Pacific again, we still have Tropical Storm Christy right here. It's on my screen right now. For the most part, it failed to reach hurricane strength. There was a chance the National Hurricane Center highlighted that last night, but since then they've dropped off that possibility as the storm started to weaken as it starts to move over colder waters. Hank, I know you've probably been looking at Christy as well. What have you thought with it?
Well, it's been really struggling because it's been kind of in the outer fringes of John's outflow. And then it kind of got a chance to kind of re-strengthen today because, John started to fall apart. So that's where it almost got to hurricane strength. But now it's been hitting, cooler waters, higher, stable air mass in general. So convection is really having a hard time really blossoming over the region. Going to continue throughout its life as the National Hurricane Center forecasts it to eventually become a remnant low, I believe, by Monday. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they show it becoming a depression by Monday.
They actually think it'll dissipate by Sunday morning, actually.
Sunday morning? Okay.
They think it'll
I guess, yeah, that makes more sense.
Here's the current forecast map from them. They show pretty weak... They show it weakening pretty quickly at this point, but taking until Wednesday, they think it'll actually survive as a noticeable system for until at least Wednesday morning at this point. Some of them are saying it, could last longer, dissipate sooner, but they think it'll maintain tropical depression strength as a non-tropical system until at least Wednesday morning at this point in time.
Yeah, the thing that I'm kind of more, I wouldn't say concerned, but somewhat a little bit caught my eye, is that, in fact, let me just pull this up really quick. Is anyone showing screen share right now?
I can pull up screen share for you.
I'm going to do this really quickly. Out. That's the wrong tab. There we go. So what I have been noticing with this storm, that's relative humidity, what am I doing, is that once it kind of hits this trough over here, because it's part of the subtropical jet, once it hits this trough, then all this moisture you see right here getting pulled off the storm, and then additionally John, all that's going to get kind of funneled towards, in general, California, though it's kind of hard right now. It's kind of a bit iffy as to whether or not this could cause any significant rainfall. Past model runs were showing that it could have generated some significant rainfall, though that seems less likely now, considering that the storm is taking more of the westerly track, kind of retrograding with the actual with the actual subtropical jet. So I don't think that it's going to be a significant rainmaker for California now, but I just wanted to point out that it was at one point, not as a tropical system. What I'm saying is that all the remnant moisture was going to be stripped from the system, and the actual circulation is going to be left to die on its own. And all that moisture could have been flown to California, but at this point, that's kind of looking somewhat unlikely, because if we go to the GFS forecast, to let's see, southwestern.
I was going to say, the thing is with both of these systems, they've really been losing all their convection really to a more stable air mass in general. That makes it seem like it could be less of a rainfall threat in general.
Yeah, the rainfall threat, it's going to enhance it over California, but it's not going to do anything of significance. Yeah, it's definitely enhancing moisture, but it's not going to be, a significant washout for the region, as it actually once was forecast to do. So Christy, I don't think it's kind of falling under that weakening storm scenario that is going to eventually leave the EPEC without a tropical cyclone, and I can't speak. And this is new, actually. I didn't even.
Yeah, that just came up now.
Yeah, I wasn't even looking at this, but apparently there is another
disturbance. Yep, that was just made. I think also, speaking of rainmakers, though, we have 96W. David, if I'm not mistaken, from some of your postings earlier, the Vietnam Weather Service had it as a tropical depression, or am I wrong when I say that?
They have it as a tropical depression, and the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, their information indicates a change to the curve to the east, and I'm just having trouble bringing the information up.
Because, I mean, looking at it on satellite, it's obviously really disorganized, but it's stalled out over this area in the South China Sea, between Vietnam, Hainan Island, and really southern China, where it's been producing heavy rainfall for multiple days now, and this region has, in the last month, gotten a lot of rain. I know we've talked about Son Tin came through the area and stalled there for over 5 days in general, dumping copious amounts of rain constantly. Huge flooding problems happened there, and this is just really aggravating that even more.
I've got the information. Joint Typhoon Warning Center has it around 175 nautical miles west-southwest of Hong Kong, animated enhanced infrared satellite imagery, and a microwave image depicts a broad region at low level turning with two separate masses of persistent deep convection, one located to the east of the low level circulation and one to the northwest. Vertical wind shear in the vicinity of 96W is low to moderate, 10 to 20 knots, but increases sharply to the south. In addition, upper level divergence has weakened over the last 24 hours. Sea surface temperature remains 28 to 30 Celsius in the South China Sea. However, we look at the models. Global models still strongly favour development despite the now marginal upper level environment.
Yeah, I was going to say, the thing with the models is they mostly they keep it stalled in the same area and kind of bring it a bit into China and then really develop it once it projectedly drifts southwestward back into the South China Sea again. That's when they really try to develop it mostly. It'd be right around here. You're right about the marginal conditions, because it has land interaction and really high levels of wind shear to the south of it. And you said two vorticities? as well? Is that
Yeah,
what you
there's
said?
two separate masses of persistent deep convection, one located to the east of the center
yeah,
and one to the northwest.
You can tell that because on the vorticity map mode right here, it's still pretty spread out in the region, although you can kind of pinpoint where center might be just by where the strongest vorticity is. Although if you look at satellite imagery, it's really hard to do that because of how disorganized it looks on map right now. I'll pull up actually a forecast model for the system in particular. We'll pull up the GFS one right here. You'll see what it does. It really has as nothing. I know the Vietnam has as a tropical depression, but it doesn't really show many characteristics of it right now. But they stalled in this area, and then around day 5, the models try to develop it in between Hainan Island and Vietnam.
What are we talking about right now?
96W.
Oh.
So
sorry if I interrupt like 5 seconds after, because my connection really sucks right now.
Yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to add this bit. Led into action, you mentioned that, and a change in steering flow due to the building steering, which has started to induce some uncertainty in the track solutions. The system is expected to make slow progress towards the east before heading west in the mid-late period. Maximum sustained service winds 18 to 23 knots, and minimum sea level pressure is around 997 millibars.
Yeah,
so the Joint Typhoon Warning Center maintains it at high for further development.
Yeah, it's interesting to see with the computer models, because most of them do nothing with it in the first 3 days, as they keep it basically stationary. But by day 4, they move it in between Vietnam and Hainan Island and develop it. The GFS develops it into a typhoon. I know the earlier HWRF model was doing the same thing, but this is a newer model, and it actually keeps it east of Hainan Island and develops it into a moderate tropical storm, bringing it out eastward off the coast of southern China instead. If I zoom out on this right here, and if you're looking at the stream, you'll see it brings it eastward instead before bringing it back west again. They bring it significantly further east at first, at day 3 having it inland as a tropical storm, and then bring it all the way west back in between China and Hainan Island and Vietnam as a significant typhoon. This is actually an older model, but that was from yesterday, saying it would be a significant typhoon there. But going today, they are trying to say a moderate tropical storm south of China, not close enough to Vietnam to really cause significant impacts.
The HWRF model has been very, very intense on developing, I think, 96W. When I looked at the Chinese weather site, there wasn't hardly anything what's going on.
I actually have something I could pull up in support of actually the formation of this.
Yeah, let's see it.
Okay, so this is a recent ASCAT pass. Not really all that recent, but it's from quite a few hours ago. But I still think it's significant given the recent kind of organization. You can kind of see here it has developed a broad, and I really will emphasize broad center circulation.
And that's kind of emphasized on the vorticity map mode as well.
Yeah, though the vorticity map, that doesn't really show you wind speed, and that doesn't really show you
how
it's actually consolidated in terms of actually where the close low would actually be centered. So that kind of takes into account more of the atmosphere. This actually counts into the actual surface winds. So according to this, it would have had a pretty, not necessarily close, it's still kind of elongated for at least my taste. But, considering that the recent, convective organization, I mean, you probably would have your low somewhere, if I'm just taking a look at this, probably somewhere in here. And, you have your pretty strong, winds out of the southwest. And then over China, you have these kind of slightly weaker winds out of the northeast. So in general, you have your broad area of low pressure.
Yeah.
The question is it tight enough in here to be deemed a bona fide tropical depression? That's kind of the question. And in addition, it's still kind of elongated, like I said.
Because right now the JTWC are not calling it a tropical depression, but Vietnam's meteorological agency is actually classifying it as a tropical depression.
Yeah, the JTWC tends to do that. They don't really. What I've noticed is that they don't really take into account whether or not it has a legitimate close center circulation. They just see, is the convection organized?
Yeah.
And if it's organized, it's a depression. It doesn't really take into account the actual surface features. And the JTWC/ATCF does. So, so the thing with this system is also that it's kind of elongated, not quite as extreme, maybe something a bit more kind of like this. I mean,
yeah, and I think the most important thing to say about this is unless the GFS and HWRF are somehow right in some of their runs, and this manages to rapidly intensify and become a typhoon, that, of course, the most dangerous things with this storm will definitely be rain. For over 3 days now, it's been dumping a lot of rain in northern Vietnam, Hainan Island, and extreme southern parts of China, and it looks like it'll continue to do so for at least another 3 days at this point, which is definitely really dangerous for the area.
Yeah, I haven't really checked the actual steering, but
I'll actually pull up some of the model consensus forecasts right here. I'm actually doing it for you right now. The global models, this shows the GFS and the NavGem. They're really mixed on it in general right here. They bring it in the same area for over 5 or 6 days at this point, 144 hours. Here's the GFS over Hainan Island, 144 hours, which is 6 days for the NavGem, has it over northern Vietnam. The GFS ensembles are really erratic as well. 5, 6, 7 days out, they still have it in the same area. And the CMC ensembles, I'm pretty sure, are a bit different, actually. They actually drag it all the way out towards Korea, some of them, the outliers, but most of them keep it a bit east of Hainan Island. But in general, it's staying in the same spot, and I just want to go out of my way and check the Euro quickly to see what it's saying about it. If I go over here quickly, let's go here. This is what 96W would be on the GFS. Let's go to the Euro. This is what it is right here. You can see 2 days, it's still in the same spot. 3 days, same spot. By day 4, it's in northern Vietnam, and day 5, it moves further inland and dissipates. But it shows that at least for another 4 or 5 days, they're going to be receiving extreme rainfall in a very similar area that they're getting it in right now than they have gotten for almost the past 3 days.
Yeah, the thing is with the 96W is that it really doesn't have much of anywhere to really go. I mean, really your steering currents are pretty, aren't very strong. In fact, if I pull up, let me just kind of zoom out here and kind of give you a better visual of this. So here's our invest down here, wherever in here, and you have kind of a ridge here over China, right here, and that's kind of pushing air in from the north. So you would think that it would be kind of moving a little bit, but no, not really, because you also have another ridge over here, kind of down towards. It's more of an upper level ridge than anything, but it's a bit more over here, and that's kind of also forcing in another little tag in for that. So really you don't have, this thing doesn't really have much of anywhere to go, but this ridge over here is quite weak, as you can probably tell from the imagery. You have some convection around it, so this might eventually is going to get starting to be, I can't speak, it's starting to get a bit dragged towards the southwest.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's why most of the models end up, as we get towards day 3 to 4, bring it in between Hainan Island and Vietnam instead of bringing it eastward.
Yeah, that's kind of the general consensus, because the ridge over China is going to be the stronger of the two eventually, and it's going to push in 96W in that direction. But if you can see here in the GFS forecast, it's really okay. The ridge is over here. My bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really weak right now, and you have this that the ridge right here is pretty weak, and then you have these two troughs right here that are generally kind of forcing. This one's actually kind of forcing Yagi into China, but over here you really don't have a very strong ridge. I mean, you have a very weak kind of flow right here, and at the upper levels, you have its anticyclone, which is kind of negating it a little bit. But you can see the height anomalies. Yeah, you can see generally that this ridge in between these two lows, this one nice W and this one over here, kind of associated with Yagi, it's pretty weak. So, and then you have another weak ridge over here. So, you know, this whole area generally very weak steering currents. So this thing is not going to go anywhere anytime soon, particularly fast at least. But over the next.
And speaking of just invest in general, I know that, of course, 96W is probably the bigger invest that we're looking at. But if you want to pull up 97W as well, I think that's something interesting to look at in general, just because it's actually now, according to the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, expected to develop, just not in the next 24 hours. Is that satellite imagery of it?
Yep.
It's looking a lot more organized than it did yesterday in general, and the real interesting thing about it is models in general are really uncertain with how it'll define itself. Most of them bring it as a really broad circulation area. So I know the GFS is kind of interesting. Yeah, David, you were going to say something?
Strat, the JMA, Japanese Meteorological Agency, is not interested in 96W, and I think I should, and I stand corrected, highlight that the JMA is the primary forecaster for that region. However, they do have Invest 97W as a load. They also have a track on their website. However, the Joint Typhoon Warning Center has 97W, 200 nautical miles northeast of Guam, and the animated multispectral satellite imagery depicts a consolidating low-level circulation center obscured by flaring convection, beginning to take on some rotation. Environmental analysis shows that the region is overall favourable to development, with low 5 to 10 knots vertical wind shear, adequate upper level divergence. I'm just curious what the upper level divergence is for that region.
I was going to pull this up. There actually is some spinning action in the atmosphere now. It does have a distinct area of vorticity surrounding the system at this point. What
I look for is anything above 30 knots to 40 knots for the upper level divergence. But let's see, hear what Hank said about the 850 millibar vorticity. There's one that I follow, and when you look at 97W, you can note the intensity scale on the right hand side of the screen. What I look for is the tightening in and the reds through to the right. So 97W is looking a lot healthier, considering it's further east to where 96W is located. So 97W will be one to keep an eye on. And then we've got Tropical Storm Yagi.
Yeah, I noticed with 96W, if you're looking at its location in general, I'll pull up my own screen here. It's in an area of it's actually in an area of pretty low wind shear. If I switch back and forth from vorticity quickly, you'll see it's right around here off of Guam. It's on the edge of favorable wind shear conditions, but the general direction it's going in, which is northwest, has very low wind shear and rapidly decreasing in the area that it's heading in as well. So it does look like it has a significant chance to develop within the next couple of days. I know on satellite imagery it's looked much more impressive as well. I know Hank was showing that just a little bit earlier. And I think that's really something to keep in mind, that the interesting thing with this is models are really uncertain about how organized it's really going to be. If you look at the Western Pacific and I go to vorticity with this system, this is going to be 97W right here where my cursor is. And as you go into the next few days, there's just this really kind of larger mess and it isn't really a defined system in this model run. Probably just a significant rainmaker, if anything. There's, they forecast in general to head towards Taiwan and China, but it's really not specific on how centralized the system will be. They try to have it as a low center right here, but if we go to the Euro, you see just a really broad mess of undefined circulation, really, and they can't really pinpoint a specific location where the storm is going to be at that point.
Strat, can I butt in really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
That is not 97W that you're pointing out near time.
Not?
It's a completely different system. So
this is probably 97W right here then.
97 is the one further south.
It'd be,
and east is 96
right on the Euro, and then it picks it up here and kills it off at 72 hours. Actually, that's my fault, and it just has this separate mess of vorticity. So you're right about that.
So then there's a completely separate invest that forms. So the thing with 97W is that the shear map that you showed, which, I mean, I could say a few things about that map. I really despise it, but that's besides the point, is that it's in an area that has very, pronounced kind of lower convergence and upper divergence. So that basically means that air is flowing in at the lower levels and flowing out at the upper levels, and that's very healthy for a storm's ventilation. And if you can see here, if my screen share is good, I hope it is. Can you really quickly confirm if my screen?
Your screen share is working right there. I can pull it up. There you go.
Okay, so what I'm seeing here is that, I have it on. So what I'm seeing here with this is that in here is probably a forming. Wait 1 second. It's probably a closed low right in there, pretty close to it if it isn't quite yet.
I was gonna say it certainly. To be honest, it kind of looks better than Yagi. To be honest.
I mean, I guess, but another thing I'm noticing is that this is the surface low. Here's the mid-level low. I can kind of tell this whole thing is kind of elongated with height towards the southeast. So what that means is that this thing needs to really couple, and the fact that there really isn't too much shear right now. Oh, that was not okay. Don't know why it zoomed out all the way. Yeah, that is horrible quality. There we go. So the thing with this is that you can see here, you have some easterly shear right here that's coming in, and that's kind of forcing all of this, any convection that could form here, that's kind of forcing it to kind of force itself out. So that's why you have most of the convection focused on the south side, and because you don't have any real connection up here towards the north side of the storm, you don't really have anything to pull the mid-level center, up to stack on top of the surface center. So for now, it's decoupled. And as this whole thing moves up towards, the northwest, it's probably going to end up being shot up by this ridge over here. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, the models are in consensus that it's going to move northwest in general over the next couple of days.
Yeah, 1 second. Let me just see if I can. I don't know what's going on here, but let me just fix this. Okay, stop. Okay, there we go. So what I'm noticing with with 97W is that as it's going to be pushed up towards, why does this thing keep on playing? I don't want it to play. I want it to stop. Stop.
All right, there we go.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. So what I'm noticing is that this is going to be generally moving towards the northwest, same direction as Yagi, as this, kind of front boundary kind of forces air in this way, and as a result, kind of forces it adjacent to that flow. But you can see out here, you have this huge ridge, this huge subtropical ridge that's going to be forcing it towards the northwest as well. And that same ridge right here is going to be basically the forcing of this general, the jet stream, basically. And then as this kind of retrogrades a little bit towards the west, then it's going to allow another dip to kind of come in, which will pick up over here, Hector, as it's moving up towards the northwest. It's going to eventually pick it up, and it's going to shoot up towards maybe the Aleutian Islands as the next tropical cyclone. As right now, it's being steered towards by this general
excuse me, by this kind of weak ridge right here, and it's going to be kind of forced up, and then like kind of something kind of like that for Hector, and that's all because 90, and that's kind of because 97W over here is being under the influence of this ridge over here of towards the northwest, and what 97W is also doing is that all the shear coming off of it is kind of forcing this high to move up towards the north a little bit. So you kind of have a bit of a bulk up here in the flow, and then you're going to have more troughing over here, which Hector's going to get picked up by. So the interesting little interaction going on there. And then of course Yagi over here doing Yagi's thing and moving into China as this frontal boundary kind of dips in a bit farther south.
Yeah, Marcel, what is it?
What?
He just muted himself. All right.
Oh my.
Now that we've really gone over this, I know you're probably not going to be the most keen on this, but I think we should check it out. Anything. There's the two invests or areas of interest in the Atlantic Ocean. Do you want to go pull those up, or do you want me to keep them up on my own screen share?
I'll do it, I guess.
I have it right here for now. You know, I heard people chatting about this wave last night in the tropical Atlantic. The NHC gives it a 20% chance of development in the next 5 days. I think the thing, and you're probably going to agree with me when I say this, is that, you know, there's just so much dry air around the system that it's not really going to be able to get a chance to really form, right?
In general, yeah. So I'm going to pull up really quickly the relative humidity. First of all, is my screen share working?
Yep, I've just pulled it up for you right there. So it's on for you.
So here's our little system, whatever you want to call it, right here. And then, I mean, you don't have to be rocket science to figure this out. Look at this. There's a lot of dry air in front of it. And if we go to the sounding right here that I showed a little bit earlier on in the broadcast, you can see here that it's a very dry environment, and that there's pretty strong, not pretty strong, but, you know, stronger than normal zonal wind in here. So basically trade winds. At about what I would assume, so that's 15 knots, so probably a bit over that, considering that it's kind of more deep into the atmosphere. And because you have all this dry air right here, and then your homograph, the holograph up here showing that the wind speeds of height and, you know, with height and the geopotential heights is kind of misaligned, so the ability to actually get updrafts in this area is very, very, you know, frugal, to say it kindly.
So I think we can all really agree that this area of interest isn't really going to do anything. I think the one that might warrant a bit more attention is probably the second one. I'll actually pull it up right here. It's going to be this one right here. It isn't tagged as potential development in the next 2 days, but 20% in the next 5 days. It's in an area similar. It's going to be in an area similar to Debby, and it's kind of interesting because it's a sort of a similar area of which Debby formed. If you go to the Euro, is particularly interesting. I know Devin was actually complaining about this earlier today, because the Euro drops it down right here and tries to develop it as a system right in the central Atlantic. It'd probably be at least starting off as another subtropical cyclone, just because of the nature that it could form in potentially. And it kicks it off in a similar direction, bringing it north to northeast after a couple of days. It'd probably be, you know, another weak, short-lived system if it does form. I don't know if you've really been paying attention to this one in particular, but have you seen anything with it, David?
Sorry, Strad, just ask the question again, mate.
You know, we were looking at the Atlantic quickly, and we were checking out the northern area of interest that the Euro tries to pick up on a bit. What were you really thinking about it?
I don't think the percentages are going to increase above 20. I don't think the one to the east of the Leeward Islands, I think that's
we're
okay.
Looking at the one a bit further north.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to develop.
Hank, what are you looking at?
And I'll say that for both.
Hank, what are you thinking with at least the northern one? I think it's pretty certain that southern one won't develop, but there could be a bit of interest for the northern one.
That's what I've been seeing, but honestly, I just don't really see it. I mean,
Yeah.
you have your upper level configuration right here is, yeah, that's not favorable for really strong, convection to really, ventilate. So, that's not very conducive with the upper trough literally located right over the storm.
Yeah, it's just in general, it's clear that there won't really be much activity in the Atlantic, at least through the next 10 days. So I don't know if you saw it, but I actually put up a poll in the community tab last night to see how many storms people would think formed in the Atlantic through the rest of this month. And over 75% of people said there would be at least 2 storms to form in the rest of this month. It was really interesting to see that.
I mean, towards like the last 5 days of August, you could easily see, 3 storms form in a day. So, I mean, that's possible, but I wouldn't see, I don't really see anything, long-lived to really form anytime soon. And I mean, consider that it was around this time last year when Harvey was emerging off the coast of Africa.
Yep.
And, that trekked across the Atlantic and it formed in the main development region, and we're just not having anything that can really form in the main development region right now. I mean, yeah, Harvey dissipated in the Caribbean, but then look what it did in the Gulf. So what I'm trying to say here is that nothing really long-lived to be tracked is very likely to form, just considering that the whole tropical Atlantic as a whole is still relatively hostile. Yes, before you rise up with the pitchforks and all that, I know that the MDR has warmed a bit. And I say to you, big deal. Because you know what? Sea surface temperatures don't really matter as much as actually having the actual African easterly waves move over. And what I've seen is that the EKE anomalies, the eddy kinetic energy anomalies, show that there is a significant, there's significantly below average all throughout the main development region, which means that there isn't very much spin with these waves. There isn't very much, vigor. They're just not very vigorous at all. Like the only one that was somewhat decent was Barrel, and that was a stroke of luck. Basically.
Yeah, it was a really small system. It was just able to curl itself up together.
Well, I mean, it was also in a very favorable but very, very.
Yeah, it found a really small pocket where it could really thrive.
Yeah, I mean, it was just right place, right time. If it was a day late, or actually a day earlier, or 2 degrees further north, it would have been a depression at most. It wouldn't have gotten to Cat 1 if if either of those 2 scenarios happened. So what I'm saying is that main development region, despite the recent warming, still isn't very favorable. I mean, if we look at, all they have to do is just pull this up, and you can see, like, that's you literally have
the amount of dry air is really obscene.
Like, you're literally having waves over here that have where the convection will be the highest is where you have the dry air. All that Saharan dust is the highest. And I mean, yeah, this is further up in the atmosphere, but it's still pretty remarkable. And CFS is, not kind to it either. I mean, that's okay. That's not what I meant to do. It's.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So all of the dry air that's coming off of the African continent I know that it's Saharan dry air. I get it. But is there a name for like that? Like how they have, names for things in the Atlantic that I guess I don't really understand. Is there a name for that except for Saharan dust or Saharan air?
Well, it's technically called the Saharan air layer. So it's a layer of the atmosphere where the dust actually. It's for south for short. It's kind of the layer in the atmosphere where this dust actually kind of prospers. And that generally tends to come off of Africa during, pretty much most times of the year, but it's really at its strongest throughout the summer months, especially July and early August. And this year has been a bit stronger than normal because your African monsoon has also been a bit more amplified. And that's also as a result of the African easterly jet. So basically the jet that surrounds a big high pressure that tends to sit over kind of Spain-ish is kind of a bit more stronger than normal here. So you're pumping in a lot more of that Saharan dust over the Atlantic, and it just happens to be over the main development region for tropical cyclones this year. So
Yeah, and I mean, I just pulled up the animation of the past 5 days. You know, captures every few hours of the Saharan aerial map. It's bad in particular. Just, you know, there's a lot of missed images, but from what you can see, you have a big plume that's just come off the coast that's kind of spreading over the main development region. That's really quashing any chance that this new area of interest really has. It's why its development chances are so low. And, you know, looking at the forecast models that Hank was showing previously as well, it just looks like there's, you know, it's just going to continue to move westward. It showed actually a big amount of it reaching into the Caribbean. I remember even earlier this year, last month, it was even stronger. There was haze over your place in Texas, right?
oh yeah, like it was. I wasn't there that day, but apparently, like you could barely see downtown
Oh
from
my goodness.
like
I know
about
one of our other team members, Isaac, he was there that day, and there was really a lot of dry air. Like he said, it was really hazy that day.
yeah. So, I mean, Saharan air does tend to make it across the Atlantic into the Gulf into Texas every year, but to that extent is pretty rare, especially considering how like the quantity, not necessarily like how bad it is on a certain day. It's just there's been a lot of days that have been like that. I mean, they've kind of died off recently because it's August and it's raining outside, so it's not as bad now, but it's just been squashing anything that wants to form in the main development region. In fact, I have this loop, of the satellite. Is my screen showing right now? Because I kind of want to show
Yeah, I'll
this.
pull it up right now just for you.
All right.
There you go.
Okay, so this is what I'm going to show you here is a loop of the past 2 days. So you're going to see this pretty big wave come off Africa, and this is our current, this is the area of investigation that we're watching, and you can just see it's pretty strong at first, and then it kind of starts to, kind of fizzle out a little bit, and here's the wave right here, and
It's basically gone at this point, really.
yeah, now it's just gone. So that's what Saharan air can really do to these tropical waves. It just squashes. I mean, they might look, pretty, I guess, promising, over southern Africa, but then they move, and then I guess south of the Cape Verde Islands, but then it just goes really quick. And
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes to answer a question that I just saw in chat a little bit ago. How active we think the main development region will be this year? How many storms? In your forecast and in Force 13's forecast, and if I'm not mistaken, the National Hurricane Center forecast, it was highlighted that there will be below average activity in the main development region. Seeing barrel form was pretty unlikely. It was a surprise for us to really see, but overall, the main development region should be under average activity this year. Activity will likely be focused in the Caribbean, Gulf, and in Northwest Atlantic.
Yeah, you got to really watch the subtropics and the Gulf this season, I think, especially throughout the next month and a half. And then, once we get to late September, October, you might have to start watching the Caribbean. But, I mean, because that's generally, in the analog years that I've kind of analyzed, the years that have been similar to this tend to have, they tend to have a lot of storms kind of be a bit weaker, with the exception being 2014. But you don't really have them impact land significantly until the later half of the season.
Yeah.
Good example of that being 2002. You started out with a lot of really junky, short-lived storms, but then once we got to late September and October, we had two pretty, major hurricanes come and impact the United States as weaker storms, but they were still pretty significant storms, those storms being Isidore and Lily of that year. Similarly, 2014 kind of had a lot of hurricanes. It actually had an average amount of hurricanes, but 8 named storms, and none of those really impacted land significantly aside from Arthur in July.
Yep.
And then we had a month lull, and then we had Faye and Gonzalo hit Bermuda, both making landfall in Bermuda within a week of each other. So things like that can happen. You just kind of catch you off guard a little bit. And I guess one more example of that, 1994, very, not very impactful season at first, with the exception of Alberto in July, I think it was. And then October was completely dead. And then November comes along, you get Florence, which does very little, but then Gordon, which is a really impactful storm, and was a very deadly storm, especially for Haiti. I mean, you can get storms like that can just kind of
Yeah.
pop up and kind of confuse you. And one last example of this, 2015. Yes, I know. El Nino was already roaring by that time.
Yep.
Let's forget about that. But 2015, you had very little, very impactful storms starting out, and then late September hit, you get Joaquin. So, you just got. I guess we just really have to watch for that time of year, in my opinion.
And that really goes to show, like, the saying that even if it's an inactive season overall, one storm can make the season be called an active season. Really, you just need one big storm to impact, and that really changes everything. Going a bit off topic, I was looking up a bit earlier. I don't know if this person was here. They wanted to ask us about the invest further in the North Atlantic, the area of interest. We talked about it. It's just it kind of is an area similar to Debby was, but it just doesn't really look like it has a good chance to develop. Something I actually want to go over now, because we've kind of ignored this the whole stream, is Tropical Storm Christy. I have its satellite imagery up here. I'm going to refresh it to get the latest frame in to see what it looks like. And, it was highlighted earlier today, a few hours ago in the National Hurricane Center's update, that Debby had lost what an eye feature was going to seem like on satellite imagery. It really seems to have started to wind down in general. If you're looking at my screen right now, you'll be able to see it just clearly. It's trying to still blow up convection around its center, but the southeast side in particular is looking really exposed at this point in time.
I think so. We need to watch out the Atlantic in September and October because of the examples that Hank said, like 2015, and the start was a very active season, but then Joaquin and happened what happened, and also 94 season.
Yeah, what do you think about with Tropical Storm Christy, though, Marcel?
Well, I think she's on its last legs. She will dissipate soon, because she is going into cool waters and into higher latitude. And
yeah, I'll pull that up for you. Here it is. They expect Kristy to dissipate by Sunday morning, so they're saying just about a day now. They expect it to wind down pretty quickly, and then actually remain, as a remnant low 4 or 5 days. They don't expect it to dissipate that quickly. They expect it to take a while to wind down in general. That's why you see this forecast cone go so far out even after the storm dissipates.
Yeah, this so far this year, it's been very interesting. It's been not very active this whole year for almost all basins, if not all, and but overall it's been interesting. And I think, as it's been mentioned before, it only takes one storm to really make the season.
That's right.
Yep. And
like it.
Go ahead.
It doesn't even take the season itself. It just takes the storms, because those are the seasons are just the periods that when the hurricanes and tropical cyclones in general are most likely to occur.
It's not working.
But also, it all depends on the storms and the systems. It's not just the season itself.
Yeah, and I think it really what specifies that it's really the storm and not just the number of them or how strong the winds are. That's where we see those big rain threats, like 96W right now in particular, which is still producing a lot of heavy rain over southern China at this point in time. And these are the kind of storms that can really be the most dangerous, because when you see a storm like this that is already stalled over the region for over 3 days, and it's expected to really remain here for at least another 5 or 6 days, that much rain in such a short period of time can be really harmful. And I'm not saying that this storm is anything like Harvey. Harvey was obviously something that was really on another level, but just referencing how damaging that much rain can be over a relatively short period of time. These are the kind of systems that you see that can really get you worried. And you know, David, I'm pretty sure you've still been looking at the Western Pacific in general. You know, over the past couple of days, we've been watching 96W. We actually have an update or two from you on it on our channel. So what are you looking at with it in general?
I think it's the steering mechanisms for 97W, 96W. As you said, it's definitely a rainmaker. The Vietnamese weather office, and they have it maintaining winds around 41, gusting 41 knots for the next 3 days. It's far too early to say what it's going to do, but 97W has a better chance, according to the UK model, the HWRF, for tropical storm status, but it's far too
97W
early to say what is happening. But Stratton, seeing I've got the microphone, I would like you to switch over to the satellite imagery for the Atlantic.
For the Atlantic, okay, let's take a look. What about it?
And I invite you and Hank to have a look at the Bay of Campeche, Gulf of Mexico, and whether there's an area of interest there. I'm not saying a low, but a rainmaker.
Rainmaker.
It's currently just been producing rain.
It's just an area of pretty strong defluence. It's not going to be particularly. It's not even producing, of what I've seen, any sort of, you know, deviations in wind flow at the surface. So,
I'm pretty sure conditions there are probably going to be unfavorable as well. You know, it's actually not bad shear, but it just really shouldn't be something that gets together.
Shear isn't the problem. It's just that its structure is just all over the place, and really, it's just really.
I believe personally the deciding factors of this so far this season has been mainly, it hasn't been the energy, because the energy is there, but it all depends on the conditions itself, like wind shear and the air conditions, like if it's either dry or moist enough to sustain conducive development of thunderstorm activity.
Yeah, looking at the main development region.
Stratton, apology, just another question. Looking at the satellite, the GO 16, Hank, the environment is definitely changing when you consider what's coming off the African coast. I know we've covered the Saharan dust, but can we agree that the environment is changing? Well, for more low pressure systems to develop down there to the incoming weeks?
I would say, you know, as you get towards the peak season, you're expecting the Saharan air layer to lift in general, waters to warm, so generally more favorable conditions. But we're not really looking at anything like last year, when at this point we already had 2 systems formed, and we had another 2 form within a few weeks of, you know, this time last year as well, and 2 of them, you know, turned out to be the strongest. If I'm not mistaken, we actually had 6 main development region storms last year. Maybe 1 or 2 more, I forget in particular, but I know we had a lot. You know, that's just something we're not really seeing this season up to this point, and that should probably hold. I know we have to wrap things up soon, so I want to do one quick check left at the active system. So in particular, Yagi and Hector. I know Isaac's been posting in chat that Hector definitely starts to be looking at as a weakening trend. Here's the satellite imagery. Cloud tops are really starting to warm, and the southern side of the system's really waning in general. I don't know if you're looking at the stream or can see my screen in particular, but you get what I'm showing you, right? It's just,
you know,
yeah, if you pull up satellite imagery,
we're looking at the life of the, and we're looking at the no floaters.
Yeah, these are the floaters. You can see right now, at least in the past few hours, convection, cloud tops have warmed. The eye is still staying pretty warm, but the storm's definitely becoming less symmetrical in general. Cloud tops are starting to warm significantly. Not really, doesn't have a ring of negative 70 degrees Celsius anymore. Still a large area of negative 60s, but not near where it was earlier. I guess this is the point where we can say in mostly agreement that this is going to be the start of a weakening trend. You would agree with that, Hank?
Not really. You could see that the eye actually has warmed significantly since the really beginning of that loop, and that's just because any eye wall placement cycle or any inner core changes have occurred. That it's either intensifying or that the actual intensity is kind of stagnated right now. I don't see the weakening though. I mean, yeah, the southern side isn't as great, but I mean, the eye is
still looking very warm.
The eye is a lot better from earlier. So I would say, just looking at Dvorak imagery,
yeah,
justify it, definitely. But like, I don't see weakening in this.
Yeah, here'd be the
at the current moment
for you right here. I'll pull that up. And also the other thing that we have to look at is going to be Yagi. I know through the stream it's developed a bit of a burst of convection over its eye, or not its eye, but the core of the system. Something we hadn't seen at all in the past over 2 days. Really just in the past couple of hours, you're seeing some convection flower up over where the center is about to be. So the JTWC currently has it, if I'll pull it up right here, let's pull up the warning graphic. Here it is. They say it's going to peak at 40 knots and move towards Shanghai. It's been interesting to see how this system's acted because its whole life of over 2 days now, it's been heavily sheared with no convection around the center, usually displaced to the south. So this is the first time we're really seeing convection pop up over the center of the storm. And David, I don't know if you've been looking at Yagi recently, you've done some updates on it, but noticing its track shift recently, do you think that this could be more of a threat in terms of rainfall for China now than before?
For Shanghai, yes. And the JTWC has it tracking to the passing within 40 nautical miles southwest of Okinawa within 18 hours, drifting into the East China Sea before making landfall just south of Shanghai.
Yeah,
and they have a slight intensification, and you mentioned 40 knots, so will go higher than the 40 knots forecasted.
Yeah, it's still obviously a really disorganized system. It just looks like, convection's finally trying to flower up over its main center. Hank, I don't know what you have to say about it, but, overall the structures may potentially be starting to improve a little bit with convection actually flowering up over the center.
I mean, potentially. It just depends on...
Depends on whether or not it can maintain itself.
What I am noticing a little bit in the imagery is that the surface circulation is a bit elongated, so circulation that happens would have to be pretty slow. And by the time it really can get going, it's going to start interacting with, conditions in general as it approaches the coast of China, so I don't think that it will get particularly strong.
Yeah, right now the forecast peak is 40 knots, so only 5 knots stronger than it is right now. That's the current forecast from what they're saying.
And the flaring convection is sheared 83 nautical miles to the south, the initial position based with high confidence on the infrared loop.
Yeah, and if you look at the other convection, it's really far to the south. This system's been really heavily sheared.
And it's tracking along the southwest periphery of a deep layer steering ridge to the northeast.
Yep.
And the JTWC saying it should adopt a westward track and intensify up to 40 once it gets into that South China Sea. And I think the previous typhoon did the same thing a few weeks ago. It re-strengthened in the South China Sea. I think it was only, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. Although it was approaching.
No, I can't think of the name of it. It was
Yongdari. It was approaching from Japan at that point.
Yongdari, that's right. Yeah.
But anyways, we're actually gonna have to wrap things up after covering 5 systems for the past hour now. This is the time the stream has to end. Sadly, even though we've been going for a while, we have to cut it off. I'm hoping everyone viewing this right now has gotten some information out of this. Marcel, I know you're sad, but you're gonna have to live with it.
The stream has finished.
Yeah, we're finishing right now, Marcel. We're still live, actually. But, we're gonna have to wrap things up here. We'll still have updates, of course, on the main channel constantly. I actually uploaded one on Hector just a few hours ago. Dave and I are, really working hard to bring content for you guys out while Nathan's away. He's coming back in 4 days, guys, so don't worry about it. Actually, 3 at this point. Links to check us all out are in the description below. We have our YouTube channel here, of course. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Facebook and Twitter as well. Those are all in text. Those are also in the description below. And Patreon as well. That's something kind of important that, I like to talk about, because having a project like this isn't particularly inexpensive, and we've really run for the most part for 7 years now without any help. So having someone chip in just even $1 a month is really helpful. There's reward tiers, of course. I think they're pretty lucrative, and we have a lot of other plans coming in the future as well, so you guys want to stay tuned. I'm really excited for when Nathan comes back from vacation, because we've been talking about, amongst some of us, a lot of new ideas that we're going to be rolling out, and a lot of revamps that we're going to be doing to make the project a lot more professional and high-end to serve better content for you guys. But that's really going to do it for tonight. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next time. You guys want to say goodbye?
Bye for now.
Marcel, you want to say goodbye? Alright, have a good night, guys.